IPPS-A leads the way. IPPS-A. One system, personnel, and pay. IPPS-A. 21st century. IPPS-A. Total force visibility online.
Welcome to another edition of the IPPS-A podcast. I'm your host, Colonel Greg Johnson, and very excited today to talk with Lieutenant Colonel Brian Hollandsworth, who's on the IPPS-A team, all about Release 3. What is Release 3? What's in Release 3? What does Release 3 mean for IPPS-A, and more importantly, for you and the users in the United States Army? So let's get right into it. Brian, why don't you introduce yourself? You've been on a previous podcast. You'll probably be on, another podcast in the future, but nevertheless, why don't you introduce yourself and let's get right into this Release 3 talk today.
Sounds great. Thanks for the opportunity. Lieutenant Colonel Brian Hollandsworth. I'm the Release 3 test lead currently. I've been on the program for a little over 18 months. I started as the design lead, then the build lead, and now the test lead. And so really had an opportunity.
Jack of all trades.
Yes, sir. So a glutton for punishment is another way to look at it, but really had the role of pulling things together as far as the design and all the great work that went ahead of Release 3, the Tiger teams, those fact-finding missions with our stakeholders like MCOM and HRC, pulling together requirements, verifying those requirements, coordinating for stakeholders, and then through the build process, providing refined understanding to our integrator, who has to make sure that the requirements and business rules are actually as we need them to be. So currently what we're doing is we're doing our test effort. That's a separate podcast, so look for it on where you get your podcast, of course. The fact of the matter is we're about to wrap up with integrator-led testing, and then we're quickly transitioning to government acceptance test, which for us means we have the keys to the car, we can see the car, and we get to put it through all the rigor that we would like to have confidence that we're going to field a quality product to the total force in December of this year in 2021.
A lot there to unpack, to say it mildly, Brian. So you're the test lead, but you really have been the Release 3 build lead, right? Then that ties to the test. And then as we go live, I don't know, you're probably the sustainment lead. And we did that pretty deliberately. You were there for the preliminary and critical design reviews. You're in the middle of when our integrator built the capability in Release 3, and then you're overseeing tests, and then you'll oversee as we start going live with the whole Army. A little bit of method to our madness is, you get people that see this whole thing through. But let's go back in history, right? A year or so ago, give me a real quick rundown of what the preliminary design review, critical design review did, and how we incorporated stakeholders, and how did that all play out, for you and for us on the IPPS-A team?
Absolutely. So preliminary design review, I had the fortune, while still assigned to my previous unit, to come out TDY to do the kickoff for that event. But preliminary design review and then critical design review really provided an opportunity for us to see the requirements end to end for the system. What made it, challenging really was it was the first time where you had to collect all of the requirements in our requirements traceability matrix, a fun term in the acquisition community, to make sure that end to end you have everything you possibly need on the table. And so for our program, there was a lot of effort to ensure that we had the proper detail and the precise language, lessons learned from previous other software fieldings, as well as our Release 2 partners who had already gone live. And so during preliminary design review, we held meetings with all of our stakeholders where we bring personnel from HRC, Installation Management Command, Forces Command, TRADOC, any Army command that had a vested interest in the system, to come in and provide granular detail on processes that are very important to how the Army operates, but not everybody knows how they work. And so for preliminary design review, it really was framing up the house. And then in critical design review, it was doing the final concept, the final sketches, to make sure other design documents, that all of the artifacts that are required by the DoD were proper. And what that means for us is it allowed us to ensure we had a good picture of what we were building as we went into build. Furthermore, making it challenging was the fact that we operate under a a firm fixed price world, which means that the Army says we're going to build a certain product. So you have to get it all in and everything right. And it's for the functional team. To your point, sir, we had lots of late night conversations, lots of good development for myself arriving into the baptism by fire that is IPPS-A, but really going back and fighting for every little bit you could. Every piece of functionality had to be negotiated with the system integrator. We had to compel them as to why it was needed, and then compel them as to why, if you took this off the table, you would lose the integration piece. The really the benchmark or the heart of the system is the integration. That's why it's IPPS-A, the integrated personnel pay system. So if you're taking off an interface, if you're taking out a function or feature, well, then you've now made it harder on the end user to actually leverage this use or implementation of PeopleSoft. And so preliminary design review, again, was kind of the big blocks. And then critical design review is really where it became a bit of a slog, where we had to push through and have weekly touch points, make sure the design documents were properly articulated, because we couldn't leave design, or we couldn't leave CDR if we didn't have a firm design, because we had to build it essentially starting in December of 2019. All of that really paid great dividends because, as everyone's aware, COVID hit. And so because we had done the best effort we possibly could to get the design firm during PDR and CDR, we were able to provide our integrator with a product to build from. I don't know that had we not been forced to do that, or had we not had the level of discipline, that COVID would have been any easier or more palatable to do while you're doing a software program, because software inherently has some give and take, right? So we had to be forward thinking in most areas.
Yeah. I think you saying it's kind of a slog is a good, I think, word for, even PDR. So the preliminary design review, critical design review is meant to set essentially the design of what we're building in Release 3 that we're going to roll out in December of 21. So at that point, at the end of 2019, our functional team had to understand everything that it wanted to get functionality-wise out of the system, from talent management to the marketplace to the analytics that we want to execute, HR actions and operations, how the mobile device would work, how the app would work, how promotions, you name it, how all of this had to work in a PeopleSoft software system. And then what was even tied to that, which made it more difficult, is the tech approach for the data to come in and be converted. And then also how we were going to send data out, and then how essentially your infrastructure would work to support all of that. We call it system performance. All of that had to play out in that design, and then we had to lock it. And you kind of hit, hey, there's an acquisition term in there. We've been under a firm fixed price contract, which, it really limits to a certain extent what you can change as you move forward in the build. But, we've been able to work through any kind of hiccups we've had, and honestly keep time. I mean, even in the middle of this COVID environment. So I don't know. Talk a little more about that, Brian. I mean, for me, I don't want to say we've had any hiccups based on COVID in 2020, and having to decentralize our operations. I don't know. What's your take?
No, I don't think it's affected our operations. So truthfully, we learned a lot from our integrator partner. So the system integrator had personnel who would work remotely, usually 1 or 2 days a week, either Monday or Friday. And so our personnel became really good at coordinating with stakeholders. You just couldn't possibly bring everyone to Crystal City, Virginia, to our headquarters to do all the meetings. So we had built some of that discipline indirectly, which was great. The other piece was we have a system integrator partner. A lot of the developers that we deal with, they too want to see this succeed. So to your point about being able to get to yes, it's about playing within your constraints, but it's also about everyone having a common understanding of how everyone gets to go live together. Because just like we know we need functionality, our integrator and our PMO partner see it as well. And so for the team, really the challenge of COVID for me wasn't coordinating with stakeholders. The bigger challenge for us was the fact that, even throughout that, just like everybody else in the Army, you have personnel turnover. And so my team, we attrited personnel who were part of design. They had to repurpose within the program because, we have efforts to do HR transformation, which again, listen for that podcast. It's going to be great. But you have these other efforts on the team that need talent as well. And so we had to be very deliberate, right, about putting the talent in the right place. But COVID didn't slow us down. If anything, the only thing where it really inhibited us was there are some stakeholders from Human Resources Command that would have liked to come out more and to interact with the integrator, right? Because for them, they have such a huge part of how we do distribution of soldiers in the Army. That part is challenging, but at the same token, the integrators and the functional team have made themselves available just as much. It just what you miss out on is the face-to-face interaction, which you just can't make up for that in some instances. But I think that the team that works for me really did a great job of mitigating that as much as they could to make themselves available. Off hours. Integrators work crazy hours as well, and so I don't think COVID was detrimental to our ability to get live or to get, more importantly, get the functionality we need. Because at the end of the day, getting live is important, and getting live with the right program is just that much more important.
I kind of think it may have been easier if we were face to face, but at the same time, it might not have been. The use of Microsoft Teams and some of these other collaboration tools. I know the program uses Skype and a couple other things as well. Heck, the ability to text and FaceTime, our individual teams as needed has helped us just keep pace from my perspective. And then, another thing is too, is like I kind of really wanted to be transparent with our stakeholders and our partners and sharing where we were in PDR and CDR, and then working through concerns, comments from all takers, right? So if you were focused on plugging into us, which most of our significant stakeholders were HRC, MCON, the National Guard, USARC, the reserves, and then ForceCom and others. I mean, we adjudicated comments and concerns and whatever issues during that design period. And I remember doing outbriefs to the HRC commander. Hey, your command gave us 500 plus comments. Here's how we adjudicated those. Here's the few that we don't think we're doing in release 3. But here's how you're going to do everything else. And you helped lead kind of that adjudication of those, which
I did, sir. That was fun. It was north of 500.
Management.
It was north of 500. I'm not going to give the total number, right? But there was a large volume. But that's kind of the approach we had, right? Their feedback was needed to make sure design was perfect. We have the functional team becomes more of an L&O for stakeholders, and you also have to learn to speak what PeopleSoft does, right? So we're fielding IPPS-A, which is built on PeopleSoft. You have to be able to push stakeholders beyond the realm of the current process to how it will operate in IPPS-A. And frankly, they wouldn't know that because they're in the current fight with fielding other systems or updating systems like AIM2, ASCM, all these other software programs that they're working or these systems they're building out. So we give them that grace. But yeah, every comment got read and reread repeatedly. It got understood or manipulated to see, hey, what's the root cause? Is this a PeopleSoft limitation? Is this a limitation because frankly you only have so much time and scope that you can fit in, right? If you were to try to build the perfect system, we would still be in the middle of design, frankly. You just can't get everything in. You have to snap a chalk line, which is what we did in design. Now, I would say that wasn't meant to suggest there were compromises. It's just there's decisions made to say, I have to get release 3 live by this time. This is how much time to do that. And then I'm also programming in when I'm going to do iterative updates to the right to kind of expand it out and to stretch out the capability over time so it's predictable for the user. That's kind of
but I would also say you go through that design review and you're essentially snapping the chalk line for what you deliver in December of 21. And then the rest of the discussion is now, hey, after you go live, right? The beauty of this program, I think, is that we're going to continue to upgrade the product. So twofold, right? There'll be some issues as we go live, and it's about, what do we need to upgrade? What do we need to fix that helps the basic design for release 3? But then also it's, hey, what do we upgrade? What did we not get done for HRC that's going to assist them? What did we not get done for commanders? It's probably more important than HRC. What do we need to do for commanders to get them what they need to make better readiness and manning and marketplace type decisions? And then somewhere, right, S1s fall in there. How do we make, their operations more efficient, and soldiers more efficient as well?
I think to that point, sir, though, is we were very deliberate in our design to build out what we call frameworks. You know this, but just for the audience, instead of building out a bunch of activity guides or how do you walk through the process of doing a certain type of action, it's just cost prohibitive to try to build every possible thing without really knowing what those are. And so what we did was we built out a framework for that, which we could quickly replicate future action requests as we go live. And so what we did was we said, what are the foundational types of capabilities that we can build within IPPS-A so that it becomes easily modified going forward, versus it becoming a large project to do research dollars to build. It really is just an enhancement upon what we built. And so there was a balance there, right? You have to deliver the functionality that the user can use on day one. But there's certain areas where you can say, I can use an admin correction par, for example, a personnel action request, a more general request. And then as I go to the right, I will add an additional specific personnel action request, which will route for the soldier, which is ultimately what we want to get. And so the trade-off was, how do you build something that will be sustainable that you can build from, vice building out 3 or 4 specific actions without any type of way to build from that. And so that was kind of the pivot that the program took. Another one will be, and I won't speak a lot to data because again, there's another podcast for that, but something going to more of a topics-based, a more modern interface arrangements, right? It makes it more sustainable from an Army data perspective. And so those are the kind of things in design that for the new guy showing up was like, okay, that does make sense. But when as you're working through the design, it's helping communicate that to partners so that Installation Management Command, AMC, their headquarters, they all understand how that's going to work at go live, and then giving people a predictable timeline when they should expect that after we go live in December.
Yeah, I think that's, as we start to talk about the actual functionality of Release 3 a little more, right, there's a lot of capability that you've provided in these frameworks, or essentially the initial release of a capability. So CRM, customer relations module, is a software form that we'll be able to use. We have an initial marketplace delivery that will take over AIM and ask. You have BI, business intelligence framework. You already talked about a few of the other frameworks that we built that you can just continue to iterate on and expand. And then for users, this is one of the exciting things. You can use the system and then send us your kind of comments as you use the system, and then we'll rack and stack those and then upgrade as we go. We did that in Release 2 quite aggressively, and we're able to adopt a lot of what users' feedback was drawing us to, concerns or issues in the system that they wanted addressed, to make the system work better. So big win there. Again, some conscious decisions at PDR and CDR to do that enables us to continuously upgrade as we go to the right. Because one of the big changes of IPPS-A is, hey, we're not just going to deliver IPPS-A Release 3. It's not like 1986. You get a system until we come up with a new system. 10 years later, we're going to continuously push out upgrades to this thing, which makes me kind of excited.
Right. And to that point, we're building Release 3. Obviously, Release 2 is live now. And so we learned a lot from them. Speaking of design, there's things that are done in the live system for the National Guard in Release 2 that informed. We have items that we looked at for retrofit. So as we got out of build, or as we were finishing up build, there were items we know that Release 2 was doing that we wanted to bring forward. Additionally, we're setting conditions for Release 4. So there's even one specific epic that we call it payroll risk reduction event. And so what that is doing is it's helping us understand what payroll triggers exist in Release 3 so that as we transition to release 4, it's smooth. So all these have to come together, right? It's what is the foundational need? What is the functional requirement now supporting Army leadership with talent management specifically in this instance, providing the necessary analytics as we collapse some of these legacy systems so that, users at the Army command and below can see themselves. And then how do you continue to make sure you have parts that set conditions for R4? Another good example is our payroll special pay, right? So there are certain actions that are done in IPPS-A Release 3. I don't own full mill pay, but I do have the ability to send transactions to DJMS or the finance pay system so that they can make certain actions and updates. So basically eliminating a large volume of transactions that exist today to start building some space for our HR professionals to do more talent management, start working on transitions for our military pay offices. And so the challenge when you ask somebody like me, what is in Release 3, is it's like it has to be a lot. It has to be everything to everyone as far as what's Release 2 capabilities as the base functionality, and then how does it posture the Army to not just build out talent management when you get to December, but literally how do you start collecting the data so that you can start doing a talent-rich or data-rich talent environment? And that's where we're trying to get to.
Yeah, I'm going to coin that. What's in IPPS-A Release 3? A lot.
Yeah, it's kind of. I'm gonna get a T-shirt made. Yeah, but it's comical because, folks, it's a fair ask, right? What are you building in Release 3? What are you gonna give for me? And as a former Brigade S1, Battalion S1, OCT, and there's a lot of people on the line, or who may be listening to this, who are commanders. What does it mean for me? Well, it means your processes will have to change in some ways, but it's going to give you a level of transparency you don't have in legacy environments. It's going to force some uniformity of process so that we can finally say this is the best way to do the practice or the process. Never limiting commander to have flexibility, of course, but allowing soldiers to have predictability of where their actions are. I mean, just basic workflow visibility, which makes sense to everyone else. I should know where my action is. There's nothing more frustrating as an S1. Not because the soldier came to see me, but because they couldn't know where their stuff was. Like I somehow had to do them a favor to tell them. Well, you don't have to do that in IPPS-A, because if you do the action in IPPS-A, you can see the action in IPPS-A, and you can see where it's being hung up. And that's what we owe our soldiers.
So then let's Barney style it for a second.
All right.
Because you jumped into like what I think one of the coolest things of IPPS-A. So I kind of, bucket things in a couple of maybe 4 buckets for Release 3. So when asked, hey, what's in IPPS-A? I go, hey, we're going to do all your basic HR actions, right? You're going to do your leave form. We're going to do your old 4187s. Well, they're called personnel action requests. And we're going to do it in the system. And you're going to route, as an S1, you're going to route those to your chain of command for approvals. That's how we don't lose anything. And then that status of that action is visible for the user. So if you're a soldier and you put in your leave form, you're going to know, hey, the leave form is with my whatever company commander, and it's been with my company commander for 4 days. You'll be able to see that as a soldier. You'll be able to see it when it's approved. The second is we're going to do the talent management stuff. We're going to do the marketplace. We're going to have a 25-point profile. So essentially what that means is a lot more talent type data, HR and pay data on each individual soldier, whether you're, an E4, a staff sergeant, sergeant major, or, some 3-star general. That information will be in IPPS-A, visible to your commanders, for sergeants, et cetera, for really utilization in the unit. We'll have BI, so we'll have HR analytics that can be used to help man and see personnel readiness, but it'll have medical information, it'll have training information, it'll have, those knowledge, skills, and behaviors, et cetera. And then I talked just for a second before about CRM, that customer relations module. That will give us a framework to interact with your S1s for assistance and help. So you don't have to go in the S1 shop anymore. I mean, this is one of those big change things. If we use this the right way, folks don't need to run into the S1 shop anymore. And then we'll also use it to track, kind of issues that we see in the system. All of that comes with Release 3, but we're also rolling out mobile capability in an app So you can get into IPPS-A off of your personal mobile device or your government mobile device. You can be at your house doing your leave form, or if you're hanging out on the weekend, you can check your profile off your phone. So, I probably check my stuff too much on the weekends, but right, that ease of use though now flows down to the soldier. That capability to not have to be in the company orderly room to figure out your HR record is a big game changer. Anyway, so you want to talk a little bit more on that, Brian?
Yeah, sure. I think that speaks to the access piece, right? We love to see troopers coming into the personnel office to the S1s, but there's always the frustration of access because the timing doesn't work out. But what this allows us to do, to your point of CRM, I can now, as if I'm the S1 or the G1 or the battalion commander, XO, insert leader here, I can actually go back and look at that and say, hey, when did this action come through? When did this individual need help? So that we can not only solve the problem, but if there's a system problem for providing HR support to our soldiers, these professionals who are in the military, we should treat them with the respect they deserve. Well, now I can see that. It's not anecdotal anymore. It's literally, I can go in and run a report. Workflow analytics is something we're providing. So again, if I'm a battalion commander or XO, I go through and I say, hey, I want to see analytics. I want to see which companies are problematic because that's taking care of soldiers. Not that you're at the beck and the call of soldier, but something is important to that soldier. It should be important to their leaders is kind of the philosophy that we go with. And so absent having a uniform way to put it in a system, you can't force that. You can't force the ability force the transparency really needed for soldiers' actions to get through, because it's important to them, right? If they're sitting on the weekend updating their profile, it's probably because they want to compete for a job, right? It's probably because they know there's an opportunity that they won't get if they don't represent their best self. And so what IPPS-A allows a soldier to do is to go in and provide that feedback, because there's just certain things you don't get from a legacy environments. Legacy systems aren't going to send you any particular knowledge, skills, and behaviors that I'm going to allow you to self-profess in a more uniform way. And that's huge. As we go forward, we were talking about the release 3 and then future enhancements. I mean, if you have that information, then you then allow the total Army to start looking for talent across the total force. And I know there's some conversation on that. But you have to do this part first to get to what people visualize or envision the Army being in the future. You have to do the basic input. You have to convert all the legacy data in from all these sources and get the car on the road, for lack of a better way to state it, or you don't get to do it at all. And that's not an appropriate answer, because soldiers and leaders need that. Will it be perfect when go live? I mean, I'd love to think so. I'd love to think that and have the hubris that our design teams are so perfect, but I'm not naive, right? There are changes every day. We have requests from Army staff, Army leadership, engaged leadership who's like, how can I make Army HR and personnel and talent management work better for our Army for all the right reasons? Well, every time there's a decision made, that affects us because we have to account for that in the system if it's a software fix or a business rule. But you know what? That's a good problem to have, because it means we're actually staying relevant to the conversation versus we're building a system, to your point earlier, sir. Building a system, it's just going to sit there and it's going to become obsolete at go live, and you're just going to live with it for 20 years. That's not the point of IPPS-A. That's not the point of going with a Koch product like PeopleSoft, because there's going to be other capability we know we're going to get in their software pipeline. And so it's how do you use it. So I did have a little bit more to your point, hopefully not too much, but that's how I see it.
No, it was great feedback. As I chew on this though, Brian, it's like, yeah, we got to get something out. So the Army's been waiting a long time for IPPS-A, probably too long, right? But we've been focused on getting it out to the Guard, stabilizing, enhancing that, and then now we're headed towards, in December 21, the active and the reserves being added with the Guard. I think for the Army and listeners, hey, just acknowledge up front, it's not going to be perfect. We are working our hardest to make things fall into place with our ASALT acquisition brothers and sisters and our integrator. But there's some known knowns. Like data is very bad. I'll just say that in the Army. The authoritative data for HR is split between all kinds of systems right now. and we've rolled out a very deliberate data correctness campaign. And we've even asked the SMA to send a note out to everybody in the Army to focus in a couple of areas with their HR data, and that's the data that will come in to IPPS-A. If I worry the most in two areas, it's that data correctness. Hey, are we really focused on the data? Because when we go live, we're going to use this data in EMOPO and a couple other systems. And if soldiers and commanders and S1s haven't looked at that data and we go live, hey, don't get mad if you didn't focus on it now. We're going to go live with that data, and that's the answer. So that's one area that concerns me, but we're making, I think, good approaches in the Army to look at that. The other is system performance, right? We're asking everybody to be in IPPS-A in the Army, and we've really given this to our acquisition professionals to focus on. Hey, we have 1 million users. There's going to be 40, 50, 60,000 potential concurrent users, and they're going to be wailing around in the system. We need to partner with you to make sure that this works the way the Army needs it to work. So we're very similar to how the civilian world reacts to performance. You use your app for USAA, or you use your app in some other company, usually have pretty good performance. So that's always a concern for me because of what it means to just interacting in the system. So those are two focus areas we have. But you get past those two big hurdles, which we're attacking really hard, and this is an exciting system. You're going to have at your fingertips on your phone your HR record, your pay record, and we're more and more going to do more talent management things tied to this. And then you have access to kind of everything about your record, again at your fingertips on the phone. So we're really excited as a team. I know you are, Brian. Let's circle back though. NCOs are going to be key in a couple areas in this rollout. What do you think the role of the NCO is in IPPS-A? And I'm not talking about HR folks, because HR folks kind of get what they're going to do in this thing. But what do you think the role of the NCO is in IPPS-A?
So I think as you look at that, your point about the HR NCOs knowing, you're right, they've been exposed to it. I think the first part is acknowledging for the entirety of the NCO Corps and all soldiers, this is everyone's system, right? This is really an opportunity for them to blend in. So if that's the case, you have to have some ownership. And that means you also have to force the use of the system in order for us to identify. So in other words, if something's not working properly, if you don't actually test it, whether it's system performance, whether it's just something is not intuitive, well, if you're not forcing people to use it and forcing us to fix it, then we never improve the product, right? We end up with the same environment where we're not able to tailor it. So you mentioned a particular app. I guarantee you that version of the app is not the same today as it was when they went out with version 1.0. And so we need NCOs really in the system with their soldiers looking at, hey, what's wrong? What do you want to understand? And taking some time to learn about it, right? This is going to be the system that they spend the rest of their career using, the entirety of their career. And if they transition, which is something unique from today, and I go from the active to the reserve, or the reserve to the guard, or the guard to the active, it's the same system. So now you have one system that you have to become aware of. So it's not just the S1's job. It's not just the commander and first sergeant. It's everyone's role really to get involved in the system. So know your own record, and then to sit down with your soldiers and ensure they know about their record. This becomes foundational to understanding for Release 4, right? Because Release 4, I own pay. So build the habits now to actually use the system. Force your soldiers to use CRM to actually see how long it takes, not as a gotcha to your S1, but to force us to all as a collective Army to identify processes that need to be improved. And there are processes that we know need to be improved across the entirety. But if I am Sergeant Hollandsworth, that's what I'm doing. I'm saying, how do I force the uses? How do I push it till I break it so that it gets to be better? Now, I'm not saying I want you to break Release 3. Hopefully we design it in a way that's not. But, if you break it because something we missed, that's okay, right? That's a software development issue that we'll fix. And we've got a whole team that's as eager and sustainment to do that. It just means long days for us. But you mentioned Release 2 earlier, sir, and their lessons learned. That system has matured and now it's stable because of that feedback, right? Feedback from the National Guard, the MSTAG, key players who made sure Release 2 went live helped make it better. So the same is true for NCOs across the other two components. I have no doubt that the National Guard will have pull no punches when we go live. In fact, I look forward to it. I look forward to Major Lee Backlars and I getting lots of notes about Release 3. But what I need the active and reserve to do is to actually engage with the system, to test the system, to use the system, and then from there we'll continue to iterate on and make the system better. So
yeah. I mean, a couple of things really jump out, right? Force the use of the system, force the data inside the system. So one easy example is, hey, it still would be easy for someone to try and do a 4187 outside of IPPS-A after we go live in Release 3, and then get your commander to sign it with an ink pen, because that's all easy, in air quotes. But it actually, stops the ability for us to track the action, to understand how long the action takes, and then to have that action actually update a soldier's profile with a record of that action. So that might not sound cool to the average user out there, but it's absolutely a foundational aspect to really understanding what's going on in the Army transactionally, and then using the data from those transactions to essentially help your career and track your career and to set you up for key milestones for utilization and assignments, but also retirements. Your time in service and where you've been, right? It creates that traceable record, all in this system. Again, it's really exciting for me, but we have to force the use of this system, dramatically. So that's a big change. It's a big change from where we are today.
Yeah, but I don't think you get to, audit readiness. And I know audit doesn't sound really cool, but it is cool when you're the person getting pinged as you're PCSing from Alaska to Fort Polk, Louisiana, like me, looking for a jump log. If that's all in IPPS-A and I'm maintaining documents in IPPS-A, you don't have to interact with the soldier and cause them any undue stress. So if you do the process in IPPS-A, then now I have the trace, which is what we expect. We expect soldiers' actions to be seen. I think the use piece really goes back to folks feeling like it's faster for pen and ink. And sure, you can sign a paper faster than you can digitally sign, but through the feedback on that, on where we can improve processes, we'll continue to improve how PARs are transacted as well in the system. And so what happens is, by not, like to your point, not forcing it, we're not able to capture the metrics to give feedback to the developer to make the product more intuitive and better. And so then the Army doesn't get a better product, soldiers don't get a new process. We're still stuck in the same legacy industrial age process where a packet has to go around, which is not where anyone wants to be. I don't know that anyone really enjoys that process, except maybe some old hats who just enjoy taking a manila folder around with a staff action sheet.
I think some people love blue folders, Brian. I really do.
You can buy them in bulk, but it's not what we should be doing in a 21st century modern Army who has to get better for the next fight. And so right. I think it really, that's the gateway. I'm not gonna die on the hill of personnel action requests, but I'm saying if we can't be disciplined enough to force ourselves to improve that process, then it's kind of a tell for other areas we have to work on.
Yeah, I think that's that's candid and that's being fair. I think what's cool about IPPS-A is like you can put that app onto a mobile device. That can be an iPad. So if you have the government iPad, if you have your personal iPad, you can also use a CAC reader on that iPad and get elevated level access into the system as long as you have that CAC reader. You can take that to the field. If you have access to some kind of signal, whether it be commercial or government, you can access IPPS-A. So hey, most soldiers and NCOs, right? You guys got your phones in the field, and you're checking them every once in a while. That's probably not the best thing to be candid and open about. But if you have your phone and you have access, you can have access for IPPS-A, and so you can not necessarily have to take the 500 blue folders out in the field to get signed by your company commander. You can facilitate your company commander actually doing actions, in the field. Most laptops too have access and are portable enough. I know we're using Surface Pros, which are they're okay computers, but they're pretty mobile. So we can move around pretty easily with those and set up and do work wherever we go. I think that's just, there's a lot of capabilities here with Release 3 that as soon as you really start to chew and start to think on them, you really can change how we're operating today. You wouldn't necessarily need to bring in some from your, like in a COVID environment, you wouldn't necessarily need to bring in your entire S1 or G1 shop into the office. If you wanted to distribute your people in different locations, right? They can all connect from different places, and do workflow and do other things in the system. So there's a lot of capability there.
Yeah, it's web enabled. So you mentioned the app. So obviously, if you want to do work on someone else's behalf, then you would need a CAC. But for self-service, as a soldier, just like today, if I have an issue with my bank, I can go on and make that. I can send a note to them via email or virtual chat. I can go through. I can pull statuses. That's the same that the soldier has. So again, I think one of the biggest things we bring to the soldier is really access to their files. There's no more surprises, right? It isn't going to your S1 and saying, what do my promotion points look like? I can see that because it's my data and I'm allowed to see that. On my mobile device, on my work computer, it's available for use. And that's huge because it allows us to make sure that everyone has a good picture of what the Army sees about them. Becomes more important as we start looking at talent management as we go along. What makes me competitive for positions? What makes me more beneficial to my organization as a whole?
Yeah, totally. All right, so let's change it up a little bit. So what kind of actions are going to be in IPPS-A? Maybe we break this down a little bit, further. What kind of things are we going to do in Release 3?
So besides your personal action request, other things you'll do in IPPS-A, you will actually update your DD93. You won't, your soldier can go in, and if you have a CAC card, you can do that yourself. So whereas today you have to go in and request a second signature because again, the S1 controls access to EMILPO, a legacy system. When that goes away, a soldier can update their DD93 with accurate data by themselves. So that's one huge piece. Your promotions will all be done in IPPS-A, and as we execute promotions, we'll send the appropriate financial identifier or FID to the Army or to the pay, so that you get the appropriate pay adjustment. Additionally, your assignments will be in IPPS-A. So in a legacy environment, you get your assignment instruction if you're enlisted or your request for orders if you're officer. Well, you'll see that action in IPPS-A once you've cleared through the talent management portion of the system. And when I say talent management, we're talking about job openings, eligibility framework. So positions that the Army say are valid that need to be filled. And then do you clear the requirements for that position if there's something specific, family members, EFMP, et cetera. But you can see that all on your mobile device, right? So you can actually go and see on your phone, I have an assignment that's come out, and I can actually be aware of that action. And then when it comes to you, it goes to the local military personnel directorate as well. So we're now flattening it where you're not going in and saying, hey, I'm tracking them on assignment instructions on my smartphone, and they don't have any clue. Everyone sees the same operating picture because we're all in the same system. That's what makes it a bit cleaner.
Big change.
Absolutely, sir. And so then you go in and in a legacy environment, you have to fill out a piece of paperwork and you get your orders. In IPPS-A, we cut the order for you. You make your elections in IPPS-A, you complete what requirements are at the installation, and they say, yep, he fulfilled the requirements, he or she fulfilled the requirements, generate orders, and then magically your orders go straight to IPPS. Nobody having to forget to upload for you. So the integration piece really just says all those places where traditionally an action would fall off or a document would get misplaced or it wouldn't get submitted, well, now I've integrated so it goes to IPPS appropriately with your orders so you don't have to worry about it. As it should be. I think a lot of people come in the Army, they just assume that's how it works, but unfortunately it does not. Other things you can do, you can request your payroll absence. So, you leave and pass requests in legacy terms, but your payroll absences in IPPS-A, you can go on your smart device and say, I need to take leave from this date to this date. And depending on local policy, right? If your commander says, I will do all leave, then they will go to him. But we didn't lock that down because that's not what Army leadership wanted. So if your supervisor can approve it, your platoon sergeant, platoon leader, you can select them and they can route that for approval, which is a huge step, right? It's letting people manage leave, manage absences at their level. Awards is another area where you can do for roster awards, so that's always a challenge for the S1, your good conduct medals, all those kind of roster awards, as we call them. Well, now I'm going to see it where the commander can go make selections. Same with promotions. No longer is a commander getting a piece of paper from the S1 and circling for who could get promoted. They make the decision in IPPS-A, and upon approval, it automatically submits. So you don't have this issue where the commanders feel like it got turned in, or the first sergeant, and then to that point, a commander can delegate to his or her first sergeant. I don't know why you wouldn't, but it goes back to the NCO question, sir. How do you do it? You say, hey, commander, empower me to help make decisions for you. And guess what? No longer is it a stamp. Not that anyone in the Army would use a stamp, right, or an EPEN, but you can see who actually did it, and they were approved as the delegate. So it's a lot cleaner as far as an audit perspective. So if First Sergeant Hollandsworth works for Captain Johnson, he's been approved to do that, then he has the competent authority to approve it on his behalf, and we're all clean.
Hey, how long does it take? Like, so you delegate it, that's pretty quick. It's almost immediate in the system. But like, when you go in to approve an action in IPPS-A, is there like the 3-minute wait, like when you're digitally signing something today?
No, sir. So when you approve an action, if you're the approval authority, it's at that moment we capture it HCM, or human capital management. If it routes, you identify the next step in the workflow and you hit submit, and it pops up as a notification instantly for that person, so they know they have something in their box.
Well, what I'm kind of asking too, though, I just signed a bunch of people's leave forms today, and it took me, 5 minutes to do about 2 leave forms, right? A couple of minutes each, because I got to open it, the circle of death, and then I'm trying to, hit the right box. And then for my digital signature to then load into that PDF, it's taking literally 20 something seconds for that to play. And then for me to save it and then to send it. Right. It's a time killer.
It's a process. Is it not? So for IPPS-A, the only thing I use your digital CAC certificate for is the DD93.
Yeah.
So what I get it at is if you logged into IPPS-A, it's really your electronic signature tied to your login, which is already done with your CAC on the front end. So you won't have that process where you hit to approve and then it pings up with a pop-up and saying punch in your PIN, which is really what takes so long because it has to go and pull certificates. And so that does not happen in IPPS-A. We're able, because you've logged in and authenticated yourself on the front end, that process is a bit more efficient. And when it's done, you're not emailing it to Hollandsworth who asked for leave, right? The S1 will see it's approved, the individual will see it's approved. So it's clean at that point. And the other part that's nice about an absence, for example, is it's tied to duty status. So when Sergeant Hollandsworth is the platoon sergeant and it comes time for the per stat, he doesn't have to recollect that Hollandsworth requested leave on 15 March. The system's going to tell the duty status, hey, Hollandsworth's on leave today. You just verify. So if Hollandsworth's in formation, then you know to go back and amend the leave form, right? Because he shouldn't be there if he's on leave. But if he's on leave, then it's no problem because it's already seamless. So block leave periods, for example, right? Everyone's taking block leave. You can quickly see and build a leave tracker by day in the system, not a separate spreadsheet, but in IPPS-A because you've requested the absences.
That's pretty cool. I'm close to it though. So, maybe I'm just a kind of a nerd about this kind of stuff, but it's like, wow, we're kind of pulling all this together. And, again, the crux is going to be data, bringing the data in, getting going, making sure people are using the system. And then making sure that we're watching the system performance. And, this will be a massive upgrade for the Army from my perspective.
Yeah, I agree. And it's not just to make any one person's job easier. I think that's all about, well, we're just trying to make the S1. No, it's really about buying space for other areas where we need folks to focus, right? If you're doing marketplaces and talent management, it requires a greater attention. And so we had to automate a lot of this really to buy space for those groups. And, the structure of our S1s was built for another system that did not come out yet. So
But I think this is about soldiers too, right? Okay, I get the comment, right? About S1s and trying to make their lives easier. You put that to the side. The efficiency of the system is going to allow us to focus on different work like talent management and marketplace and analytics that really matter for commanders. So I think there's a lot of shifting of work there. But this is game changing for a soldier. Like today, the soldier doesn't know what's going on in their personnel record or their pay file. I mean, you got to look at 6 different systems to try and piece that together. So you're going to allow that off of a mobile phone and the transparency of where actions are, where their leave forms are. We're going to better the way soldiers are paid as we get to release 4, and all this is tied together. This is a big game changer and modernization effort for soldiers. And, that's also NCOs and everybody above them, because everybody is going to do that. So I think it's a game changer on a lot of different levels, Brian.
Yeah, I don't know that at any point in either of our careers where we've had this level of transparency for your own record, personnel having to come in to verify information, that their record's accurate, verifying promotion point type of act, because that's important to a soldier, right? Am I competitive for promotion? If you're not competitive because something is missing from your record, that's very frustrating for all the right reasons. And so it allows us to empower subordinates and empower our soldiers, junior soldiers today, who will be our future leaders, to make sure we get the best talent. So I don't think you're overstating it there as far as what that means for our Army as a whole. And if you're a soldier in the best Army in the world, we should expect that we're providing them the best opportunities to serve, right? And I don't know that we can do that with our legacy systems, frankly.
Yeah. Well, I'm known to be a little bit optimistic, Brian. If you're not optimistic in our business, you're probably a sorry soul. I think we could say that candidly. There's just so much to be positive and optimistic about moving forward. We're at a point where the senior leadership is driving on a lot of fronts to either correct issues in the Army, to rectify issues in the Army, and to really help and push a bunch of positive things for soldiers. You got a chief that's talking about people, and then I don't know. It's for me, it's pretty optimistic point to be at this point where we can make positive change in a lot of areas, and that's just good stuff. But I don't know what else about Release 3. I mean, we've been at it for at least 40 minutes now.
I think the other thing about Release 3, we've talked data, we've talked capability, we've talked about feedback. I think the other piece is that there's other efforts for Release 3 as far as training and deployment that are HR transformation. You mentioned an HR summit earlier, right? Those are all efforts that are tied to the success. So it's not just the design, build, test team. It's about the whole of the force, really understanding, what we needed to prepare ourselves, being proactive about downloading the app. Seems like a small ask, right? To say go and pull an app on your phone, but really you're just making one less step as we get closer to go live that you have to do. And being engaged with the training as it comes about, having conversations with your HR professional and saying, hey, I heard about IPPS-A. What can you tell me? And force people to start thinking through what this is, because this isn't just you or me, sir. It's not just the FMD or the G1, but we all have to take this momentum that the chief has provided us, and the Sergeant Major of the Army, and the Secretary of the Army, like anyone who's in senior Army leadership, and say this is really our chance to move the Army forward into a more talent management oriented versus just a cog in the wheel, which is how the Army's manned itself. So to bring it all back, I think it's about arming yourself with information, asking tough questions. And if you don't know, send the request, send a CRM note to us, let us answer it. And if we can't answer it, then we can account for it in our users guides. We can account for it in our training. So I think that's the next step for me.
Excitement. Again, for the listeners, I'm generally excited about what we're doing. So I know you've been at it for almost 2 years now, right? And maybe a little more than 2 years. I've been at this for 5 years. We're going to get this done. So, it's just really good stuff. So then let's end it there, Brian. It's been a good discussion. And for the listeners, obviously we're on every social media outlet you can think of. Get out there and take a look at our mobile demos, our live training events. We have a bunch of really simple, Stratcom messaging cartoons, right? Called the Ipsons. They explain data, they explain talent management, and they explain this little thing called mobile access, which I think you'll be interested in. Really excited to get this out to the Army in December. It's coming, and then and folks, we just need you to focus on some data. So with that, thanks much for listening, and look forward to the next IPPS-A podcast.
Motivated, right soldier, right job, right on time.
24/7, 365.